Um, Hello, I want to thank everyone for being here today, and I'm so grateful that Abiba is leading this today. Abiba is a child of immigrants. I should not be saying child. She's actually an adult. She's now a first year student. Oh my goodness, Abiba, are you a second year now? Where
Second
are
year
you
now.
as of
Yeah. First.
Oh, well, I must say it happened really fast. I can't believe I'm saying this. Abiba is a second year student at Harvard University. When Abiba got into Harvard, she actually made her school's history. She was featured in the news. She was featured in multiple news outlets, including English news, Bengali news, school news, radio, TV, a lot. So Abiba had quite a lot of publicity when she was accepted to Harvard University. Abiba went to Richmond Hill High School, which is a school, near her home in Queens. When she was accepted to Harvard, she was the first one in the school's history to attend. It was a very big deal. I'm honored to say that I've known Abiba for a very long time. Something that really stands out about Abiba is her drive to work. Abiba is someone who really knows how to work and she works very hard. And she's the perfect person to teach the class. She's the perfect person to work on with youth. She's the perfect person to mentor. Abiba is a hard worker. She is no nonsense. She does not play around. Abiba knows how to work. She has a great work ethic. And I'm very happy to say that she's the one leading this. As many of you have probably already figured out, we handpick our staff. How was Rudy, everyone? How'd you guys like Rudy? Tell me the truth. He's not here. You can tell me the truth. But okay, that's funny, right? You can tell me the truth. Tell me the truth. Tell me the truth. Don't worry. He's not here. He's not gonna know. It's all right. Tell me bad things. I'll get him fired. I'll never tell him why. No, I'm kidding. But here's what I'll tell you. So as you know, with Queller Prep, we do handpick the staff. So Abiba is someone who I knew personally. She attended Queller Prep's SAT classes. She was a Queller Prep's SAT class, and I must tell you, she really led that class. She made sure there were extra help sessions. Abiba probably is the one who invented extra help at Queller. She made sure that she got the whole class motivated to work. And I had really pleasant experiences with her. Abiba subsequently worked on her college application, got into Harvard. She led webinars on how to help other people get into Harvard. Isn't that amazing? Her mom also spoke about, helping how to be a supportive parent during the journey. There was just a lot. And then the pandemic hit. Abiba did webinars. And I really must say, Abiba transitioned beautifully. She's been working at Queller now for a year. I just can't believe, as I'm speaking, I can't believe the timeline because it feels like it just happened so fast. Just yesterday, Abiba was an SAT student at the old Queller Prep location, and here she is now running a Zoom webinar for a bunch of sixth graders about to take the Hunter entrance exam. And it's just remarkable to see that, you really can do a 180. Like you start as a student, you end as a teacher. Like it's just a remarkable experience. I'm really glad that you're doing this, Abiba. When did you finish your first year of Harvard? What day? I guess I missed the congratulations day.
Uh, May 11th. May 11th. That was my last final.
Oh my, wow.
Yeah.
So it's been a month that you've completed your
Yeah.
first year at Harvard University. It's pretty cool. So we're very impressed. And Abiba has a younger sibling herself. So hopefully she's a good role model and mentor as well. So everyone, I'm really excited that you're here. I hope that so far they're asking how old you are, Abiba. How old are you? Abiba is
No, how
19,
old my
right?
sister
Am
is,
I
I think.
correct? 19, I think.
Age.
Oh,
They're
oh, the
asking
sibling. Your
my
sibling's
sister's
young.
age. She's 8. Yeah. She's like she's a second grader. She's tiny, small.
So So I'm really happy to share with you. We're so lucky right now that we have this opportunity. You can ask any questions you have in the chat box. And again, as I said earlier, this is really important. And Abiba herself is a child of immigrants whose native language is not English. And, she had to learn all these grammar rules to do well in the SAT herself. So everything that we're learning right now is going to appear again. You're going to see this again for the SHSAT, for Stuyvesant, Bronx Science, Brooklyn Tech. And then you're actually going to see this again for the PSAT. You'll see it again for the ACT. You'll see it again for the SAT. You're actually going to see rules of English grammar tested on so many upper level exams. Those of you who take AP English, you're going to see this again. So here's the way, what you should know about the Hunter exam. The Hunter test, the old version, used to have grammar directly tested on the exam. About, I guess, 5, 6, or 7 years ago, they completely took it away. So grammar was always directly tested. Then they took it away and they added a poetry passage. So they kind of went along the same route as the reading section of the SHSAT, where they added the poetry. So they used to have 13 grammar questions in the Hunter test. They took it away. They added poetry, and it was totally right. Like, why would they get rid of grammar and like put poetry? I have no idea. Like, it makes no sense. But anyway, so they wanted to challenge you. So as I'm speaking to you right now, there's no direct like what is a verb, what is a predicate, where do you capitalize something. So they don't have any of those questions now. But the reason why we're having this webinar today to review grammar is you need grammar to do well in the Hunter essay. It is impossible to get a good essay score if you don't have extremely strong grammar. So I'm totally going to plug the grammar into the course, obviously, because you need good grammar for the essay. So I want to reiterate grammar, there's no multiple choice. They're not directly testing grammar, but you're going to see it in the essay. And by the way, they don't directly test vocabulary, but then you see vocabulary, high level words, you see it in the reading comp section. So kind of everything basically blends in together. Abiba, I'm going to let you take over. And I just want to say thank you so much for doing this. I kind of want to let all of you guys know that Abiba's doing me a big favor because she is a busy, busy bee. She has internships. She has a lot of responsibilities. She's involved in many different clubs, organizations. She does a lot of goodwill, a lot of volunteering. So Abiba is definitely a busy bee, and she's really doing this to help you. So I hope that you guys pay attention extremely well today and really make sure that you learn all these different rules. And hopefully, I really hope a lot of these are familiar rules. I mean, I hope so. So Abiba, thank you so much for doing this. It really means a lot. All right, let's go. Without further ado, let's begin.
Oh my God, I really like, that's a very weird spot to be in now. Thank you for the introduction, but I really don't deserve all that. But yeah, I think Francis kind of pretty much explained why we're doing grammar, even though it's not like directly within your Hunter exam. And this might some of these things like are very, you know them, and you might take these like the knowledge that you have regarding or surrounding these for granted. And so just like reiterating some of these, even if you do know them, it helps, especially for the essay. Because a common thing that like you may know a lot of grammar rules, but when you're kind of in a time crunch and you're writing these essays that that are very important, you can sometimes miss important things that like you think and you probably do know, but you don't pay much attention to it because you know it so well. And these can kind of be like a second priority, but they really shouldn't. Okay, great. So we're just gonna read through this, and what I'm gonna do is in order to have some sort of like participation going on in the class, I will read out the explanations, and I'll pick students and I'll have someone read out the examples that they have for these explanations. And so these like squiggly brackets, this is where the examples are for each of these. And so once I ask someone to read, just read the very next squiggly bracket. Sound good? Okay, I hope so. Cool. All right. So capitalization rules, very simple. Rule number 1, capitalize the first word in sentences, interjections, and incomplete questions. So first person on my screen is Julia. Do you want to read the example? Ooh, he may not be here. All right. Lucas Christmanis, I believe. All right. You know what? Yeah, raise hand is better. Why don't we do that? Hitham, is that how you pronounce your name?
So Abiba, I actually did a setting. Sorry guys. I did it just because I didn't want there to be a lot of noise. So you actually have to ask, you need to unmute them. So you're gonna have to manually unmute them.
Okay.
The reason, okay.
Yeah, I do think the kids do a good job though with like keeping themselves muted.
Fine. Guys, I'm gonna unmute, but do you want to, if you just unmute them, you want to just try to unmute one at a time, okay? When they raise their hands, you can unmute. Is that okay?
Okay.
You said I'm supposed to read number 2, right?
Number 1, read this.
Oh, the trees whispered.
Right. You would have to mute yours. Okay, as soon as you're done reading, everyone, just mute yourself again. Yeah, okay, cool. So very simple, right? We all know this. And yet still sometimes, in fact, honestly, quite often, I'll see essays that start sentences with not the capital letter. And so just be very mindful of these like very, very little things, that you take for granted. Okay, so also capitalize the first word in a quotation if the quotation is a complete sentence. I'm going to ask someone to unmute.
You asked me to unmute. So
yeah. Read this part right here.
It says still holding the letter, he said to her, "Where do you live?"
Right. So still starting at the first sentence, and then for a quotation where you would capitalize the W. All right. Capitalize rule number 2, capitalize all proper nouns like Shakespeare and proper adjectives like the Canadian actress. Note, capitalize the names of compass directions only if they refer to a specific region or are part of an address. So let's see. Nicole?
Don't visit the Southwest in August. If the museum is located at 75 East Huron, it is not on the northwest side of the city.
Okay. Another note, when a word like dad or coach is used as a name, it is considered a proper noun. So, all right.
My dad is a pilot. I have to ask Dad. His coach quit. Please talk to coach about it.
Okay. See, so whenever you're using it as a noun, you want to capitalize that. Okay, another note. Specific time periods, eras, and historical events are considered proper nouns. So let's go.
Middle Ages, Roaring Twenties, McCarthy era, Civil Rights Movement, Navarre Spring.
Okay. However, concepts, theories, philosophies, etc., are not capitalized. So, okay. Kalika?
The struggle for civil rights, existentialism, psychoanalytic theory, feminism, democratic ideas.
Yeah. oftentimes these kind of, I don't see obviously a lot of you guys using these terms, but if you do, they're commonly, even among adults, capitalized, but they shouldn't be. Okay, occasionally you will find variation in the capitalization of particular word. Zeitgeist or Zeitgeist. When in doubt, check dictionaries, but obviously you're not going to be able to do that in an exam. Am I lagging? Because sometimes I get this like weird notification, but I'm unsure. Okay. All right. We'll figure it out. Okay. All right, cool. When in doubt, check dictionaries. See if there's any consensus in how your research sources capitalize the word, and or consult your teacher. Again, none of these you can actually do during the exam, which is why you do all these practice things before the exam, so you can figure out a lot of the things you may be confused about earlier. In the text of your paper, be consistent with your choice about whether or not to capitalize the word. If you capitalize a specific word in one spot of your essay, make sure you always capitalize it, right? Because sometimes you want certain things to, you know, be perceived as a noun, and so you capitalize it at one point, but if you don't do it throughout the essay, it becomes just a regular word and becomes a little confusing. So avoid that. Okay. Rule number 3, capitalize the first word, the last word, and all other important words in titles of any works of art. So if you have a title for your essay, this is very important as well. Words usually not capitalized are articles, prepositions, and coordinating conjunctions. Someone want to read this list out? Let's see. John.
All right. The whole thing?
Yeah, just this list that I have highlighted. Yeah.
All right. And, the, of, to, in, for, from, with, and, but, or, nor, for, yet, so.
Right. Great. The words a, and the must be capitalized when they are the first words of the title. So like, I'm sure they have these examples here. Okay. They are usually not capitalized, however, at the beginning of names of most magazines and the newspapers, and are often left out of such titles. Note, there are specific rules for why some titles are italicized and some titles are in quotation marks. I'm not sure if this is relevant to you guys yet, but we'll see if we even get to that. Okay, so examples, right? So there are books like Great Expectations, To Kill a Mockingbird, Out of Africa, periodicals, Newsweek, poems, The Raven, short stories, The Scarlet Ibis, plays like Hamlet, paintings like Mona Lisa. So you notice how like and of, these aren't capitalized in titles. And so you would want to be mindful of that. Okay. All right. I feel like I need to have chat open, but okay. Great. Fragments and run-ons. So rule number 4. Oh, actually, let me just send this to all of you in chat. That way all of you can have this and refer back to this if you ever want to. So I will just okay, is everyone able to see that? Oh, I'm so sorry. I should have done this sooner then. Yeah, so just is everyone able to see the PDF and like open it? Awesome. Great. Okay, give me one sec. Let me send it as a link as well, so you can open it on like a browser, and then you'll be able to download it after if you want to. Either way is fine. Copy link. You can also just click on the link and it'll lead you to the PDF on a browser, and then you can download it straight from the browser. Yeah, cool. If it gets lost in the chat and you're unable to get it now, just stay after class and then ask me to send it, and I'll send it through the chat again. But yeah, don't worry about like screenshotting it or taking notes right now, unless you really unless taking notes is something that helps you remember, and you want to take little bits and pieces of notes, then that's fine. Other than that, don't worry about it. Cool. Okay. Rule number 4. All right. A group of words that does not have a complete thought is called a fragment. As a general rule, do not use fragments in formal writing. A fragment may have a subject and a verb, but sometimes even with a subject and a verb, the sentence may not make sense. So, Esme, can you read this whole thing?
After the rain, no verb. Applauded the performer, no subject. Because the boy finished, has a subject and verb but doesn't make sense alone. Although she was tired, although is a subordinating conjunction signifying a dependent clause.
Great. So note it, sorry, I need to keep up the chat. Okay. Note in an imperative sentence, a command, right? The subject of the sentence is understood to be you, even if the word you is not in the sentence. An imperative sentence is not considered a fragment. For example, take 7 pieces of candy, or stop, or do not jump. The subject is automatically assumed to be, a second person, that I'm telling this to, in this case, like the reader, which don't use that in your Hunter essay. You don't want to say anything to your reader directly. Yeah. Okay. Rule number 5. A run-on sentence consists of 2 or more sentences or independent clauses joined by no mark of punctuation or by a comma. Run-on sentences should not be used in formal writing. So, excuse me. Okay. How to fix a run-on. 1, 2 independent clauses must be separated into 2 sentences, or 2, they may be joined together with a semicolon if 2 independent clauses are closely related, or 3, they may be connected by a comma followed by a conjunction, for, and, nor, but, or, yet, or so. We'll go through those rules eventually in this. Yeah, okay. Running 2 independent clauses together with a comma between them is also called a comma splice error. So run-on examples. Let's get Aiden to read.
So I went to Chicago last week. I enjoy rock concerts. Sam took the exam last week. He passed. The zookeeper fed the lions, comma. There were 10 of them.
Okay. See, all of these are examples of run-on sentences because there are no, even though the last one has a comma, there's no conjunction after it. So it's not really connecting the 2 independent clauses or independent sentences. Great. Okay. These are very exaggerated examples, right? You don't typically write sentences like these. However, run-on sentences are still very common in some of the essays that I see. You'll write, let's say I see someone like write a long sentence, put a comma, and then start another sentence without really signifying how the first sentence and the second sentences are really connected. And so that's why run-on sentences are, they're very common. They're very like tricky, not as like, not as evident as like these examples. And so always try to write typically shorter sentences that are like very clear and precise. And whenever you do write longer sentences, make sure you have the correct conjunctions within them. Check chat again. All right, great. End mark rules. Rule number 6. So for rule number 6 through 9, I will read the rule and then someone will read all 4 of these examples. So rule number 6, use a period to end a declarative sentence. 7, use a period after most abbreviations. And 8, use a question mark to end an interrogative sentence. 9, use an exclamation after an exclamatory sentence. John.
All right. Oh wait, so I'll just say all of the like this tale is true and stuff.
Examples, the examples for 6 through 9.
Got it. This tale is true. Mr. Dickens wrote that novel. Were you nervous? Open the door.
Right. Very simple, typical end mark rules that we have, or punctuation marks that we have. And so always make sure to put a period after abbreviations, after if you write etc., etc. Unless you like spell the whole thing out, that's fine. But if you write etc, make sure you put that period. In fact, sometimes it's common. So let's say you have etc., and then you want to put a comma and then you want to continue the sentence. You would do etc, period, followed by a comma after the period, and then continue your sentence. So make sure you don't forget that. I think it's a weird like confusion that people have when you want to have like one punctuation after another punctuation because you're not used to seeing them next to each other. But if it's an abbreviation, you would do it like that. Okay. Rule number 10, Mla Formatting Rule. So since you guys are typing your essays now, this is a little relevant, right? Back when you guys were handwriting the essays, this wasn't as much as relevant. So when typing, always space once or twice, depending on the instructor preference. I would say just space once after any sentence end mark, period, question mark, or exclamation mark. However, after abbreviations, only space once. Always consistently space one time after your end marks. I don't think so. No. Cool. Okay, comma rules. All right, note, to understand several of the comma rules, you have to know the difference between a phrase and a clause. All right, here's the difference. A phrase is a group of words that hang together without both a subject and a verb. Examples of phrases. Can we get some new hands up to pick on, to read examples? No, so many, okay. There we go.
In the early morning, or after the creative writing class, or of the many senior captains, or shattering into many fragments, or in Tennyson's beautiful poetry.
Right. These are all examples of phrases. Right, so these don't have neither a subject nor a verb. A clause is a group of words that contains a subject and a verb predicate, and that functions as part of a sentence. There are 2 types of clauses: independent, a clause that can stand on its own as a sentence, and then there are dependent, or they're also referred to as subordinate. A clause that cannot stand on its own as a sentence. Go. Sorry, Hunt. We're gonna read this part. Harry Hunt, if you could read. Ooh, guess not. Okay. Raina Lawrence.
She didn't drive because the streets were frozen. Or those were the houses that the tornado damaged. Or the coach planned to go on vacation although the game was on Friday. Or I will drive to New York if the gasoline prices go down.
Great. Awesome. And Angelina can read this part.
Because the streets were frozen, or that the tornado damaged, or although the game was on Friday, or if gasoline prices go down.
Right. And so, as you can see, these dependent clauses are really just part of these like first examples, right? They're the whole sentence. And so a sentence can be made up of one independent clause and one dependent clause. It can be made up of one independent, two dependent clauses, depending on how you use your conjunctions. But an independent clause can also just be a sentence in and of itself, right? She didn't drive can just be a sentence, right? I will drive to New York can just be a sentence. However, because the streets were frozen can't in and of itself be a sentence. So that's how you would differentiate a dependent and an independent clause. Is it important that you remember these names? Probably not. It's important though that you understand how to apply them and what the implications are in a sentence. Or in a whole essay, how you want to use it throughout to make sure that you have some sort of variations going on, to make sure you keep it interesting, etc., etc. All right. Rule number 11, series. Use a comma to separate a series, 3 or more items. Use one less comma than the total number of items. Anya?
She wrote novels, short stories, plays, and poems.
Right. Use semicolons to avoid confusion when items in a series already contain commas. Goldie.
The winners are from Gary, Indiana, Chicago, Illinois, and Florence, Wisconsin.
Right. So you're using this in a series when there are already commas. So in this case, there are commas between like the city and the state, and so you want to have these semicolons going on there. Great, awesome. Okay. Rule number 12, 2 plus adjectives. Use a comma to separate 2 or more adjectives when the word and can be used in place of the comma. So let's see. Arihan, are you here now?
Yeah.
Right, okay.
We're being followed by a tall, mysterious stranger.
Yeah. So when there are 2 or more adjectives before a noun, do not use a comma before the final adjective. If the adjective is thought of as part of the noun, example will clear it up, hopefully. John.
She had an old brick house. It was a crisp, clear fall day.
Right. Awesome. Okay. Rule number 13. Use a comma to separate 2 independent clauses connected with a coordinating conjunction, and, but, or, nor, for, yet, so. I believe there's like an abbreviation called like fanboys or something. And you can like refer to that, like each of those have a specific word. related or connected to that. And you can use that as your reference point for which one you want to, use. Okay. Travis, let's go.
Jamie doesn't care for sports and he doesn't like art. Tickets are inexpensive, but I have no money. Hollow eats neither fish nor meat, nor will even kill an insect. He eats healthy for she eats healthy for she believes it will help her energy level. Karenia loves art, yet she does not aspire to be an artist. I love warm weather, so I moved to Hawaii.
Yeah. So notice that it is always before the coordinating conjunction, the fanboys, the for and, or, and, but, or, nor, for, yet. So it's always before those conjunctions that you will have comma. If it's two independent clauses that you are connecting using that. Okay. Note, be careful with so. If the word that can be placed after so, do not put a comma before the word so. As the use of that, either physically present or implied, makes the words to the right of the word so dependent. For example, I went to France so that I could learn French. So if you have so and so that are used as two different kinds of conjunctions. And so if you have so that, do not put a comma before the so. All right. Rule number 14, intro word. Use a comma to separate an intro word from the rest of the sentence. Kalika?
Oh, it wasn't that important to me. Yes, I agree. However, the Monkees are still my favorite band.
Right. So introductory words, very commonly used. So let's say you have a question, you're being asked a question that, you respond with a no, this, or a yes, this. You will always have that introductory word, the yes, followed by a comma, and then have the rest of your sentence. Okay. 15, intro phrase. Use a comma to separate a rather long phrase, right? 4+ words from the rest of the sentence. Goldie?
In Tension's beautiful poetry, I admire the imagery.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Some 2 or 3 word phrases require a comma if they are transitional phrases. By contrast, several painters use more shadows. After further thought, the coach decided to call another practice. By the way, your paper is due on Tuesday. In fact, 17 people were convicted. So those are examples of like intro phrases or transitional phrases, which, by the way, are very, very key. They're very important. It's always great to use transitional words, phrases, anything of that sort in your essay. They love that. They will eat that up, the admissions office. Okay. Note, if there is a verb in the phrase, no matter how short it is, use a comma. Aiden?
So working rapidly, he tried to meet the last deadline. Batting third, he waited in the dugout.
Yeah. So yeah, if it's starting with a verb, always use a comma because it essentially works as an introductory phrase. Okay. Rule number 16. Intro dependent clause. Use a comma to separate a dependent clause or subordinate clause, a clause which cannot stand alone, from an independent clause, a clause which can stand alone, when the dependent clause comes first. So in the previous examples, it was the independent clause and then the dependent clause, right? But when it's the other way, when the dependent clause comes first, you always want to have a a comma before writing your independent clause. So Anya, go ahead and read both of these examples.
For these examples. When her book was finished, Kate Mansfield was rather pleased. Okay.
And then just read if gasoline.
If gasoline prices go down, people will begin to travel more.
Great. So in both of these cases, when her book was finished, there's no like continuation of that sentence, right? So that's a dependent clause. If gasoline prices go down, okay, what? And so then the independent clauses that come after will be preceded by a comma. Okay. Note, adverbial clauses may be elliptical. An elliptical clause is one in which a word or words have been omitted. In elliptical clauses, the omitted words are understood by both the reader and the writer. In the examples below, right, the omitted words are shown in brackets. So when she was is not there. When visiting Utah, Claire saw the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. When eating, I saw something moving in my salad. And so these are kind of clauses or phrases that are not put into the sentence, but it's kind of implied. And so you're free to use that in your essays. Cool. Rule number 17. When a noun that is used to directly address someone begins a sentence, use a comma after it. Can we get more hands coming up? Anyone who hasn't gone yet at all? All right. Kalika? Kalika, you're muted.
Oh, sorry, it wasn't working for me. I accidentally moved myself again. So, Jill, please do your beam routine one more time.
Cool. When you address someone directly using a noun at the end of a sentence, put a comma before it. So, all right. Yeah, Nicole.
Do 100 more push-ups, Arnold.
Right. All right. And when you address someone directly using a noun in the middle of a sentence, put a comma before and after it.
I think, Rolf, that you should teach college courses.
Right. So these may not be very, very relevant to the essay, just because you probably won't be addressing someone directly, unless, of course, you want to have a quote in there where you're having like a conversation with someone and you want to have something like this in there. Then it's always you can use this, and it's good to know the grammars that kind of go to that. Yeah. All right. Cool. So rule number 18. Use comma to separate contrasting words, phrases, and clauses introduced by the word not. So this example.
This cartoon must be opened from the top, not from the bottom.
Yeah, cool. All right, rule number 19. use a comma to introduce a direct quotation and to separate it from the rest of the sentence. And, oh, okay, Zoe.
Dan said, "The soup is boiling," or "Turn off the stove," said William.
Right. This is something that's always also important. If you are using quotes, make sure you have a comma before or after the quote if you're using it. Great. Also, remember this. This is, I don't know if they have the same thing repeated anywhere, but while we're at it, might as well show you. Always, always, always put your your punctuation mark before the end of the quotation. You don't want to have quotation and then period. You want to have period and then quotation. Okay. And if you have like, like this example, for instance, again, comma before the quotation mark. Okay. Rule number 20, dates and addresses. Use a comma to separate the day of the week, the day of the month, and the year in a date. Use a comma to separate parts of geographical names and to separate the name of a street, city, and state in an address. So, Cameron?
On Thursday, December 10th, 1953, we moved to 3319 Central Street, Evanston, Illinois.
Yeah, great. Note, a comma is used to separate the last part of a geographical name, an address, or a date from the rest of the sentence. Notice the comma after Minnesota in the following example. All right, Eden.
Okay, so we sent
go
a letter to Eden Prairie, Minnesota, early this morning.
Yeah, awesome. Okay. All right. Rule number 21. Use a comma to separate a person's name or a company's name from a title, degree, or an affiliation that follows it. So Anya, go ahead.
I just met Lieutenant Mary Woodard, USMC.
Right. So the title, degree, or an affiliation will always be preceded by a comma after, the person's name. Okay. If the title, degree, or affiliation comes in the middle of the sentence, put commas before and after it. Do you want to see new hands come up to read this? All right, Angelina.
Melissa Adams, PhD, gave an award to Karen Anderson, MD. Henry Marquardt, Jr. will be speaking.
Yeah, cool. Also, notice here again, a period and a comma both, right? This is something you don't see very often and it may feel weird to you, but if you are following a comma after an abbreviation, and the abbreviation is obviously always followed by a period, right? So junior, Mr., etc. And so you will follow that with your period, and then you will follow that with your comma. And so it is perfectly fine to have period and a comma next to each other in those instances. Okay. Rule number 22. Use a comma or a pair of commas if the non-essential phrases or clauses come in the middle of a sentence to separate non-essential phrases or clauses from the rest of the sentence. Okay. So Nicole, read this.
Of course, is the only one who knows how to fix things like that.
Yeah. So this is a pair of comma that you're using to separate sort of like the non-essential part from the essential parts of the sentence. So if you took this away, it wouldn't make any difference to the sentence. Cool. Aiden, do you have your hand raised? Oh, do I have to ask to unmute you again?
Yeah, I do have my hand raised.
Question?
No, it was just to read anything else.
Oh, okay. Okay. No, I thought you had your actual hand raised as a question. Okay,
No.
cool. All right. If the element in question appears at the end of the sentence, be sure that it is truly non-essential before using a comma to separate the element from the rest of the sentence. See the two examples below. Let's have Goldie read it. They want to read. Oh, or John.
Nancy gave $100 to Glenda, who had just arrived from Chicago. Nancy gave $100 to the woman who had just arrived from Chicago.
Right. Cool. Awesome. Note, deciding whether to use the word which or that can be tricky. If you can drop the phrase or clause and not lose the point of the sentence, use which. If you can't, use that. So, excuse me. Commas which cut out the fat. Commas which cut out the fat go with which, but never with that. Example, the gymnast's gym, which is located behind the main gym, was built in 1991. And so if you got rid of this, wouldn't really make any difference to this, this sentence. It's an added information, which, adds to the conversation. But if you took this away, it would still be a completely fine sentence. The gymnast gym was built in 1991. Perfectly fine. So in this case, you're using which. In the example one, which is located behind the main gym, is disposable and non-essential to the writer's purpose because there's only one gymnast gym in the school. Example two, the dog that won first prize was Buster's bulldog. In this example, quote, that won the first prize, is essential. And so it has no commas surrounding it. And the sentence misses the point without the dependent clause that won the first prize. And so in this case, you're using the word that and not which. Okay. Note, be sure to use paired commas with transitional or parenthetical expressions that interrupt the sentence. So, Anya?
We stayed nevertheless until the game ended. The painter, Georgia O'Keeffe, by the way, took up pottery late in life. The Nile, I think, is the longest river in the world.
Yeah. So again, this is kind of a reiteration of what happened earlier. Within but if you have a transitional or parenthetical expression within a sentence, make sure you precede that and follow that with a comma each. All right, rule number 23. An appositive is a particular type of non-essential. An appositive is a noun or pronoun placed beside another noun or pronoun to identify or explain it. So use a comma or a pair of commas if the appositive comes in the middle of a sentence to separate the appositive from the rest of the sentence. An appositive might appear in any position in the sentence. So Nicole, go ahead.
Speaker, a friend of mine, volunteers whenever he is in town, or the award was given to the volunteer, a friend of mine.
Right. In both of these cases, a friend of mine is the appositive. In the middle of a sentence, it's both followed and preceded by a comma, But if it's at the end of a sentence, then it is only preceded by a comma, and then at the end you'll just have a period, and that's the end of the sentence. Okay. However, there are times you do not enclose a positive within commas. If the appositive is a single word closely related to the preceding noun or pronoun, or if you must have the appositive's information to differentiate the first noun from other nouns like it, do not enclose the appositive within commas. So, Goldie.
Shakespeare's play Romeo and Juliet will be performed at the Guthrie.
Right. So in this case, because Shakespeare wrote many plays, the title of the one particular play in question is essential information. However, a comma would be needed in the following sentence because the play's title is not essential to the meaning. So, Aiden?
So my favorite play, Romeo and Juliet, is about two star-crossed lovers.
Right. So in the first case, it is very, very essential information. And so there is no comma separating it. However, in the second case, it's non-essential information. It's an added thing that you may want to tell someone. And so while it may seem relevant to you, it's really just an extra information, an extra bit of information. And so that is preceded and followed by a comma, therefore making it an appositive. Okay. Rule number 24, Mla Formatting Rule. Always space once after a comma when typing. That's it. Okay. Apostrophes. Rule number 25. Use an apostrophe in a contraction to indicate the position of missing letters. So can we get new hands again? Anyone who hasn't read at all today? Okay. Shaz.
You're late. Can't he fix it? 'Tis the season to be jolly. He graduated in.
Okay. So yeah, so you're using an apostrophe in a contraction to indicate the position of missing letters. Right? We all use this. And so this is a common thing where you're not really supposed to use contractions in your essay, right? In your formal writing. However, there are certain times that if you don't use a contraction, the essay really does not flow well, right? And so in those cases, if you actively try to use, non-contractions, then you're kind of like, it seems as though you're trying too hard to make it sound formal. You don't need to do that. Sometimes it's okay to use contractions, or so I think. So yeah. Always write in the way that sounds more natural to you, but also make sure that you are trying to be more, be more formal and not necessarily in the way that you speak on a regular basis. Note, as a rule, avoid using contractions in formal writing, such as academic writing and business communication. What I just said. Yeah, okay. 26. Add an apostrophe and an S to show the possessive case of a singular noun. So read this, Isabella.
Bruce's attitude was psychological. I stepped on the cat's tail. The dress's lower half was
right. And so we all know how to use possessive, the possessive singular noun way, right? For a singular proper name ending in S, add only an apostrophe, dropping the additional S. If the name has two or more syllables, and if the addition of S would make it like awkward to pronounce. So let's read this. Eric?
Ulysses' plan, Layard's sword, Miss Rawlings' car.
Right. I think this is a very common question that even like adults I've seen have as to what to do when the name kind of ends in an S. Just don't use an S after the apostrophe. Just have an apostrophe and that's it. Okay. For a singular common noun ending in S, add both an apostrophe and an S if the added S is pronounced as a separate syllable. It's a little confusing, but examples, let's see. John?
The children's menu was limited, and the men's room was filthy. I found these on sale in the women's shoe department.
Oh, I think you read the wrong one, but okay, that's fine. So the actress's speech, the platypus's tail, the princess's castle. And so I guess like the easiest way to do this with an S, if not, you just don't put one. Cool. Rule number 27. If the noun is plural and doesn't end in S, add an apostrophe and an S to show the possessive case. Jazz, go again. Jazz. Oop, I guess not.
Sorry, the children's menu was limited and the men's room was filthy. I found these on sale in the women's shoe.
Yeah, cool. So again, if the noun is plural and doesn't end in S, add an apostrophe and an S to show the possessive case. Rule number 28. If the noun is plural and ends in S, add just the apostrophe to show the possessive case. So, Anya, go ahead.
Sally's parents' anger was obvious. The Willises' car was stolen by the parking attendant. The princess's castle was in Germany. The Wallenbergs live in the Wallenbergs' house.
Right. And so if it's plural and it ends in S, just add an apostrophe to show the possessive case. Very simple. Okay. Rule number 29. If two people possess something in common, consider them a single unit and put a single apostrophe and an S at the end. Kalika?
Sam and Janet's evening was ruined. Sam and Janet's car was stolen.
So yeah, if it's talking about one sort of object that belongs to, two of the same people, then just add an apostrophe after the last one and it'll be fine. So it doesn't have to be Sam's and Janet's car, just Sam and Janet's car. Okay. Rule number 30. If two people possess something or some things individually rather than jointly, each name gets an apostrophe and an S. So, Chloe?
Sam's and Janet's car came from the same dealer.
Right. And so now we're talking about two different things, right? We're talking about Sam's and Janet's cars. And so it's a plural object. And so they each have their own cars. So that's why you have an apostrophe with after each of them. Cool. Use an apostrophe and an S to form the plurals of all lowercase letters, of some capital letters, of numerals, of symbols, and of words referred to as words. So, Isabella.
She's in her early 20s. The star players got hundreds of high fives after the game. Your last sentence had too many that's in it. She got 5 CDs. I saw the Oakland A's play. Make sure that you dot all of your I's and cross all of your T's. He strived for A's.
Right. Awesome. Layla, why don't you read this whole thing?
Writing 20s. She in her early 20s and fives. The star player got hundreds of high fives. Is better in formal writing.
Cool. Another note, writers sometimes add only an S and do not use an apostrophe to form the plurals of such items, except lowercase letters, if the plural forms cannot be misread. So she got 5 CDs. In this case, there is no apostrophe right here, right? Because usage varies, be consistent. For example, if you write 1920s rather than 1920 apostrophe S, you must do so consistently throughout your paper. Okay. Semicolons. Rule number 32. Use a semicolon to join independent clauses that are not already joined by a conjunction. So, Aiden.
So some of the fans went home, others stayed until the bitter end.
Right. Semicolon use may be a little confusing. And so if you don't want to use it, don't use it, but this is one way to use it. You can always just like put a period, turn it into a different sentence, or use a conjunction, however you want to do it. Rule number 33. Use a semicolon to join independent clauses separated by either a conjunctive adverb or a transitional expression. So Nicole.
The tickets were just too expensive. However, we borrowed the money.
Right. Rule number 34. Use semicolons when independent clauses or items in a series already contain one or more commas. Goldie.
The winners are from Gary, Indiana, Chicago, Illinois, and Florence, Wisconsin. He has traveled to Syria, Canada, and Paris, France.
Cool. Awesome. So an MLA formatting rule, when typing, space once after a semicolon. Okay. Colons. Rule number 36. Use a colon to separate a list of items from an introductory statement that contains a specific number of words. So 1, as follows, 2, the following, or 3, these, right? So John, read this part.
There were 3 things to consider: weather, terrain, and equipment. Do not bring the following items to class: cell phones, food, or dogs.
Right. And so you would use the colons if you want to list a couple things, but you have an introductory like statement. And so you put a colon and then you list your things out. Great. So a note, a colon is generally not used after the words, for example, that is, such as, namely, or for instance. Do not place a colon between a verb and its direct object or after a preposition. Sorry, give me 1 sec. There's a lot of background. All right. Our example, the winner is colon Lori. Do not do that. Use a colon to introduce a formal or lengthy quotation. This is also a great way of using quotes that are very big. And sometimes you obviously have the comma, like he said or he says, comma, and quote. But other times it's not so direct, and so it's always great to have a colon and then write your quote out. So, Isabella? Yeah. Isabella?
Sorry, my Wi-Fi just stopped. Which one? Did you call my name?
Yeah, this one. The one I
Oh, the possible 3 words appeared. My name is, I can't say that.
Ozymandias.
Ozymandias, King of Kings.
Cool. Okay. Use a colon to introduce a statement that summarizes or explains a sentence before it. Rashid?
For number 36, the error example, right? The winner is colon Lori, right? Can we put like the winner is colon, then like more people or more things? Would that still be fine?
Well, in that case, it would be like the winners are, but that is also like not the way to do it, because it's just like a direct sentence and you have a verb. You could have, here's the list of winners, colon, and then you can list out all these winners. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Cool. Did you want to read, or did you just have a question? Oh, I think it's already gone. I would have to unmute again. Yeah.
Read, right? Which one?
The one that's highlighted. The officer's thought.
The officer thought that his excuse was valid. Self-defense.
Right. Okay. Note, if what comes after the colon is a complete sentence, start with a capital letter. So, Anya?
My advice was this: bring only one next time.
Cool. 39. Use a colon to separate a salutation from the body of a business formal letter. Dear Sir, colon, and then you have your thing. Rule number 40. Use a colon to separate the hour and minutes in expressions of time. Do not put space before or after the colon. And so 11:45, this is exactly how we see the time in, our digital clocks. Okay. Rule number 41. Use a colon to separate chapter numbers from verse numbers in references to passages from the Bible. Do not space before or after the colon. Genesis 6:10. Okay. 42. Use a colon and a space to separate a title from a subtitle in the title of your paper, if you use it this way. But you probably won't end up using it until, a couple years later. So storytelling, colon, images from film, or for a book, roots, colon, the saga of an American family. Unless the author preferred to separate the title and the subtitle another way, like Frankenstein, semicolon, or comma, the modern Prometheus. Other than that, if like the author preferred to do it that way, other than that, this is the grammatically correct way of doing it. Okay. Mla Formatting Rule, space only once after a colon when typing. Okay. 43. A dash, actually called an M dash, is a little horizontal line that is longer than a hyphen. Use the dash to indicate A, an interruption in thought or speech, or B, an unfinished statement, question, or sudden break in dialogue. So Sean, if you could read both of these examples.
I agree, but let me stress one other point. The party, I forgot to tell you, was not changed. An unfinished statement, question, or sudden break in dialogue. What I meant was, Kim began as the doorbell rang, but how will I have, he began.
Yeah. So basically any interruption between your sentence, and you can have these dashes, put your interruption between those dashes, and then continue your sentence after that. So 44, use a dash or a pair of dashes to mean, namely, that is, in other words, or other similar expressions that come before an explanation. So, Anya?
The bush, the one in the front yard, needs to be trimmed.
Yeah. So again, like this is very similar to an appositive, right? Where you can separate it using a comma. Normally they are interchangeable. However, with the dash, the interruption needs to be a lot more prominent. Whereas with the appositive, it's kind of like sort of important information, but you know, you can live without it, kind of thing. Whereas with this one, it's really mostly just unimportant information or something that you think needs to be added, and so you just like interrupt your sentence and put it in there. So this is a lot more explicit compared to an appositive or when you're breaking it up using commas. 45, use a dash or a pair of dashes to enclose non-essential or parenthetical phrases that contain commas. So, more people coming in. Okay, Aiden.
Yes. Okay,
Yeah.
so some primitive tools, the knife, for example, have changed little over time. Several states, California, Oregon, Washington, border the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah. So in this case, because what you're interrupting with has a comma in itself, you can use dashes now to act as what you would normally use as a comma. If your interruption phrase didn't have a comma, then you could have just used commas to separate, you know, your essential and non-essential phrases. Okay. Note, parentheses may also be used for non-essential information. Okay, 46, Mla Formatting Rule. Remember that a dash is longer than a hyphen, so type a dash as 2 hyphens. Also note that there are no spaces before or after the dash. Okay. Hyphens. Use a hyphen, A, with certain numbers, B, with certain prefixes, C, with 2 or more words used as one word, D, with a compound modifier preceding noun, and E, within a word when a combination of letters might otherwise be confusing, and between syllables when a word is begun on one line and finished on the next. Okay. Goldie? For 47, just read all of the examples within the squiggly brackets.
29, 47 days. Pre-romantic, anti-American, pro-American. Brother-in-law, Jack in the Box. Once in a lifetime experience, an up and down relationship, a well-educated woman, a muscle-building routine, a works cited list, 2/3 majority, 3/4 empty. The woman was well-educated. 3/4 of a cup, recreate.
Yeah. So the 2 notes, right? When the compound modifier follows the noun, no hyphen is used. And if the noun doesn't immediately follow, use no hyphen. Okay. So another note. When using a hyphen to divide words at the end of a line, place the hyphen only between syllables. Do not hyphenate words if doing so would leave just one letter in either line. If a word already contains a hyphen, like self-control, divide it only at the hyphen. Note, consult a dictionary if you don't know where the syllabic division should come. Again, you're not going to have access to that during the exam, but these are some of the things that you should know, and you should get used to them as you practice writing essays and stuff. So, Kalika?
The library books were mistakenly placed in my bookcase. The items I was looking for fell behind my old chapter books.
Great. Okay. Parentheses. Rule number 48. Use parentheses to set off asides and explanations only when the material is not essential or when it consists of one or more sentences. Nicole?
My eyes were filled with tears. I could not tell why, and at times a flood seemed to pour from my heart.
Great. Quotation marks and italics and titles, etc. Okay. Rule number 49. The titles of short works are put in quotation marks. Now, see, this may not be as relevant to you now, but these are great things to remember, because when you're writing future essays, you know, even like 2-3 years down the line, probably, or it may even be sooner, when you're writing essays about another piece of literature, it's important to, you know, in the opening sentence, you have to say, okay, so in like this work by this author, we see that blah, 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 blah. And so in order for you to write down properly what work they're doing, it's important to remember these things, because certain titles will come under quotation and certain titles will be italicized. So short stories. So these are the couple things that will always be in quotation marks. And you don't have to memorize them. As you practice, you will kind of get used to it, but some of these things are good to remember. So short stories. We read the, quote, most dangerous game. Essays. We studied Thoreau's essay, quote, civil disobedience. Encyclopedia articles. Trampoline. Songs, America the Beautiful. Short poems generally published in anthologies. The Raven. Episodes of television shows. The Trouble with Troubles, an episode of Star Trek. Magazine articles, like sources of energy. Newspaper articles. Did you read the article, Eagles Win Again, in today's newspaper? Lectures. Preparing for a successful interview was a helpful lecture. Chapters of a book. We read chapter 3, Building a Nation, for homework. Now, all of these short stories, essays, encyclopedia articles, songs, short poems, episodes of television shows, magazine articles, newspaper articles, lectures, and chapters of a book are always going to be in quotations. And then here's when you would italicize them. So rule number 50 is the titles of long works are put in italics. So books like Great Expectations, pamphlets, Minnesota Driver's Manual, plays, Romeo and Juliet, book-length poems, Beowulf, newspaper articles, Eden Prairie News, magazine articles, Time, magazine titles, sorry. Articles will be in quotes, just the titles will be italicized. Movies, The Shawshank Redemption, television and radio shows, Gilligan's Island, lengthy works of music, 1812 Overture, CD or audio cassette or record album or DVD, like Abbey Road, paintings like Mona Lisa, sculptures, Venus de Milo, ballets, Swan Lake, operas, Madame Butterfly, musicals like West Side Story, ships, Queen Elizabeth II, aircraft, Air Force One, or spacecraft like Mariner. All of these, when you are writing something out and you want to quote these works, these will always be italicized. If you are handwriting them, these you would put like a dash underneath, like you would underline it to make sure to kind of like imply that if you were typing it out, it would have been italicized. Yeah, cool. So short works are in quotes, long works are in italics. Yeah, see? Okay, so note, when you handwrite, underline titles that should be italicized when typing. So if you're writing about a book, like let's say you're writing about your favorite book, that's your essay. And if you're talking about your favorite book, then you would write down your favorite book, since it's handwritten, you would write it down and then you would underline the book's name, because that's how it should go. Okay. All right. This is, I'm not sure how relevant this is going to be now, but so it's good to remember. And you please keep this set of grammar rules. They're very, very like generic and can be applied to literally anything, and at any point of your life will be useful. Court cases, names of court cases are italicized. We're not going to go through this whole thing, but I guess, okay, no, let's just do it. Examples of court case title as reference in the text of your paper and in parenthetical reference. An impact of a court's decision in Brown versus Board of Education cannot be underestimated. Generations of legal scholars will continue to view it as foundational. Ongoing impact of Brown versus Board of Education. 50b, citing sacred works. Sacred works are an exception to some of the rules for formatting titles. Do not use italics or quotation marks for the books of the Bible, the Word Bible, or the titles of other sacred writings, Old Testament, Genesis, Talmud, Quran, etc. So in our class, we read excerpts from the Bible. I especially liked the one from the book of Exodus. So you're not, these like quotations and italics, these rules don't apply when it comes to these like sacred forms of writing. Titles within titles. Italicize a title normally indicated by italicizing when it appears within a title enclosed in quotation marks. Oh, got chat, sorry. Oh, okay. Thank you, anyone who's like sending the links through the chat and helping other people. Great job. Okay, so Romeo and Juliet and Renaissance Politics, an article about a play. Use quotation marks around a title normally indicated by quotation marks when it appears within an italicized title. So The Lottery and Other Stories, a book of short stories, place single quotation marks around a quotation that appears within title requiring quotation marks. So basically, if you have a title, right, and the title itself has a quotation, and so you're quoting the title. So you write, for instance, oh, this written by this person, this book, just some random title, and you have to put a quote on it, right? And if that title has a quote within it, then you would only use a single quote to highlight that. For identifying an italicized title within an italicized title, the title within is neither italicized nor in quotation marks. So basically, approaches to teaching Charles Dickens's A Tale of Two Cities. And so if the title has something that is italicized, when you write it, your entire title should be italicized, but the part that is italicized within the actual title, you would unitalicize it. It's a little confusing, I think, but just you'll figure it out. If you have any questions, just raise your hand or send it in text. Yeah, I know. I also went, whoa, the first time I heard about it. It's like, I don't like that. That's very confusing. But yeah, this is one way to make sure that you know that this is part of the title, but it's also, it's also going through the same thing that you're writing. And so now you have to like undo it in a different way so that they still know that it's part of the title, but it is also italicized. So, yeah, anyway. So rule 50D, special uses for italics. Identify foreign words not commonly used in English by putting these words in italics. The Renaissance courtier was expected to display sprezzatura or nonchalance in the face of diversity. Identify words you wish to stress by putting these words in italics. I am really tired. This is commonly used as well. This is like grammatically correct to italicize. Someone asked, is this correct to put to kill? No, so To Kill a Mockingbird is actually a book. And so because it's a book, it would not be in quotes, it would be italicized, the whole thing. Okay. 50E, shortened titles. If you cite a title, often in the parenthetical reference in your paper, you may, after stating the title in full at least once, use a shortened form, preferably a familiar or obvious one, or the first few words of the title. So, for instance, Nightingale, you can just use Nightingale for Ode to a Nightingale, or Owen Meany for a prayer for Owen Meany. So yeah, once you stated in the very beginning the full title, the author's name, and everything, you can use shortened forms throughout your paper. Okay. Punctuation dialogue and direct quotations. So 51, Mla formatting rules for punctuation marks. And I know it says Mla formatting rules and stuff, but like these are relevant for when you're handwriting them as well. Periods and commas always go inside quotation marks. Yeah, this is what I wanted to make sure that I said earlier. Didn't know if it was here. Great, very important. Periods and commas will always go inside quotation marks. And so I think you're wrong, comma, like, end quote. Dan said, quote, I think I'm right, comma, end quote, she replied. 51B, colons and semicolons always go outside quotation marks. So Dan said, I think you're wrong, end quote, then semicolon. He was asking Laurie to re-examine her information. 51C, question marks and exclamation marks go either inside or outside of the quotation mark, depending on the situation. Yes, let's make it more complicated. They go inside when the question or exclamation is part of what is quoted. Okay, so basically it's like if you're quoting a question, it will go inside. But if the question mark is not within the quote, if it's like you're asking a question and that question has a quote in it, then it will come outside. So the examples given are actually pretty decent. She asked, who did it? It's a question. And so the question mark goes inside. Or did she say I'm quitting? And so this whole sentence, did she say I'm quitting, is a question. The quote, I'm quitting itself, is not a question. And so the question marks comes outside, not inside. If that's confusing, you can leave questions. Okay, 51D. When the sentence, as well as the quotation at the end of the sentence, needs a question mark or an exclamation point, use only one question mark or exclamation point, and place it inside the closing quotation marks. So, did she ask, is this fair? And if you are questioning an exclamation, do it like this. Is it true he yelled no? ? And so if this, since this is like a question, but it's also the quote in it is a question, you would only use it once, and it's typically you put it inside. But since in this one, it's an exclamation and a question, you have the exclamation inside. And then since the whole sentence is a question, you would have it outside. What about a chapter in a book? A chapter in a book will always be in quotations. The book itself is italicized. I'm pretty sure that is within the examples of where to use quotations and italicized. Okay. Rule number 52. Use quotation marks to begin and end a direct quotation. Separate the quoted materials from the dialogue tag by commas, and do not use quotation marks to set off an indirect quotation. So, direct. A, actually, someone read this. Who wants to read? Raise hands, raise hands. All right. Who? Layla? Read the direct, A and B.
I said this fable by James Thurber will surprise you. The fable will surprise you, I said.
Great. Esme, you had your hand raised. Can you raise it again so I can unmute you? Yeah, okay, awesome. Read indirect.
I said that the fable by James Thurber would surprise you.
Right. So in these cases, right, for direct, you're using the quote, obviously. And when you're using the quote, you have a comma, whether the quote comes first or the quote comes later. In both cases, you will have a comma. But if it's indirect, you say, I said that, and then you have the rest of your quote and you kind of paraphrased it. In that case, you don't use a comma. Okay. 53. If a quotation mark or an exclamation point occurs where one of the separating commas should be used, omit the comma and use the quote question mark or exclamation point to separate the quoted material. Nicole?
Don't be late, he warned. What did you say, Bill? Ari asked. Are you planning on being late again? Asked Bill.
Right. And so if it's a question mark or an exclamation point, then you would have those particular punctuation marks rather than a comma before the end of the quotation. Great. 54. The speaker's words are set off from the rest of the sentence with quotation marks, and the first word of the quotation is capitalized. When the end of the quotation is also the end of the sentence, the period falls inside the quotation marks. So, Sean, read this.
He said, we'll discuss the fable in 1 hour. I love cookies, shouted Wally.
Yeah, great. All right, rule number 55. Both parts of a divided quotation are enclosed in quotation marks. The first word of the second part is not capitalized unless it begins a new sentence. Goldie?
What would you like me to read? This fable, our teacher said, is a twist of an old tale.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Nothing. You're good. Good job. Okay. Rule number 56. Quotes within quotes. Very similar to the title one, right? If you need to have one character directly quoting another character, then use double quotes for your main dialogue and single quotes for quotes within a dialogue. Sarah?
And then he said, mind your own business. The nerve, she shouted.
Great. 57. when you write dialogue, begin a new paragraph whenever the speaker changes. And I know you're not writing dialogue now, unless of course you want to have like a dialogue part in your essay, which not recommended. But again, like you could be using this in like the next 2 years or so, whenever this becomes relevant. So let's see, Nicole, read these 2 quotes.
Okay. Videotaping would be a great idea for our project, declared Carissa. Not only is it a popular medium for today's artists, but as it has practical applications as well. You're right, Angela agreed. Videotaping was helpful to us on the swimming team.
Great. Kalika, read the next 2 quotes.
I work for teacher training, mused Carmen, and perhaps videotaping teachers at work would be helpful. Well, I guess we should all try it, Clarissa said. Let's meet next week and compare our projects.
Great. Rule number 58. Use a dash to indicate an abrupt break in thought or speech or an unfinished statement or question. Isabella, yeah.
First of all, he said, if you can learn a simple trick, Scott, you'll get along a lot better with all kinds of folks. You never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view. Sir, until you climb into his skin and walk around it.
Yeah, great. Rule number 59. If you have the same speaker saying things that are separated by descriptive passages, you may choose to keep everything in one paragraph or separate parts into their own paragraphs. Make this decision using the same criteria you would use in deciding whether to start a new paragraph without dialogue. In other words, if you have more than one topic, give each its own paragraph. Just make sure it is clear that the dialogue belongs to the same speaker. Layla? Just read the whole thing.
If I didn't go to school tomorrow, you'd for sure. Let us leave it at this, said Atticus dryly. You, Miss Scout Finch, are of the common folk. You must obey the law. He said that the elves were members of the exclusive society made of elves. In certain circumstances, the common folk judiciously allowed them certain privileges by the simple method of becoming blind to some of the elves' activities. They didn't have to go to school for one thing. Another thing, Mr. Bob Ewell, Burris's dad, was permitted to hunt and trap out of season. Atticus, that's bad, I said, in Macomb County. Hunting out of season was a misdemeanor at law, a capital felony in the eye of the populace.
Great job. Okay. Sometimes one speaker's words run for more than one paragraph. When this happens, use quotation marks at the beginning of the quotation, at the beginning of each subsequent paragraph, and then at the end of the whole quotation. So Sean, why don't you read the first 2 up to here?
I read Spellbinding Mysteries yesterday, and I said it gripped me on the first page, and I couldn't put the book down until I had finished. The plot is simple, almost classic. 5 people are sitting in a room watching home movies. When the lights came on, one of the people is dead. Who did it? How is it done?
Great. Okay. Nicole.
Of course, no one has entered or left the room during the movies. Thus, one of the other 4 people in the room has done it. I, of course, thought of poison, but that was wrong. Well, the detective arrives, and the questioning begins. As the story unfolds, you learn that everyone has a motive. The plot thickens. The mystery isn't solved until the last page, and it had me fooled. Whew, I'm exhausted from the suspense. Wow, Agnes, you surely spoiled the book for me, said Palm.
Right. And so basically what this rule is saying is that if you have a quote that's, I don't know, a couple paragraphs long, let's say, so where does it start? It starts right here, right? This is where the quote starts. So you have this whole thing, and then it switches to a different paragraph. So you see, you don't end the quote here, right? That's what the asterisk is for, to say that the quote has not ended there. But when you start a new paragraph, you put another quote, you put another starter quote, and then you continue, and then at the end of the paragraph, it still hasn't ended. So then you go on to a different paragraph, and then you put a quotation mark again for the beginning of the paragraph. And then once that one ends, once the quote finally fully ends, that is when you have a quotation mark to end it. Rashid, do you have a question?
Yes. When we're actually writing this in the essay, are we supposed to stop in? Are we supposed to write those stars if we do something like this? Not even the essay, just like writing. No.
Yeah, no.
So
stars are actually just a point because it wanted you to refer back to like this is what it means. That's what the asterisk. Yeah, you don't actually ever use asterisk in your, so it's called an asterisk. You never use it in actual writing of any sort. So this is just to refer back to little things, but you will not be using it in formal writing, at least not at this level. Cool. Yeah, like a footnote. But typically, if you're using a footnote, you would have numbers in place of the asterisk, right? Because usually you have multiple footnotes. So instead of the asterisk, you would have a number, and then you would have a number at the bottom. So then you can have like that footnote referring to that. Yeah, cool. Great. All right. Rule number 61. Ellipsis points. Use 3 spaced ellipsis points to indicate a pause in written dialogue. So, well, ... I don't know. Sarah answered. When someone's words are a trail off, you use 3 ellipsis points. So be sure to put a space between each one. Usually if you're typing and you write ... and then put a space, it automatically spaces the 3 periods out. And so you don't need to worry about that. But when you're actually like handwriting it, make sure you have like a little bit of space. It's not like 3 periods like right next to each other. There's a little bit of gap between them. If the ellipsis points appear at the end of a sentence, you will first need a dot for the sentence period. And when there are 4 dots, the first dot is the sentence period. Okay, Isabella, why don't you read, I don't know, all of these. Oh, sorry.
Mr. L, you shouldn't do that. Do I even read like the no on the side?
Yeah.
An interruption has indicated by a dash. Of course he shouldn't, but he'll never change his ways. Are you going to take out your disapproval on his children? No, sir, I murmured. I made a final stand. But if I keep on going to school, we can't even read anymore. Note the first dot is the sentence period. That is really bothering you, isn't it? Yes, sir. When Actus looked down on me, I saw the expression on his face that always made me expect something. Do you know what a compromise is? He asked.
Right. So again, if you have 4 periods, the first one is the actual period, and then the next 3 are the ellipsis points. I've seen a lot of times people put like a lot of ... dots. You don't need a lot of ... dots. It's just 3. It's a specific grammatical rule to only have 3 dots to indicate like there was something else in here that's not relevant to the quote. Okay. Regular spelling and no excuse spelling words. So you spelled a word incorrectly. Note typos, typographical errors, count as spelling errors. And note C, the EPHS English department. Okay. It probably has it here somewhere. These words are generally penalized more than regular spelling words. So incorrect. Although it was HTE, supposed to be the best thing, double G, I heard all with a single L year, her advice came as a surprise. The correct way is, although it was the best thing I heard all year, her advice came as a surprise. This is probably like the most commonly made mistakes, right? Spelling errors, or you're writing really fast and you like skip a word, or like skip a letter of a word, or usually the last letter, and then it just, you know, becomes wrong. So don't do that. Be very mindful of that, and try to, if you have time at the end, reread your essay to correct any sort of mistakes that you may have had. Rule number 63, homonyms and homophones and homographs. So homonyms are words that are spelled the same but mean something different. Example, orange means a color, and orange means a fruit, same word. Homophones are words that sound the same but are spelled differently. She was too tired to eat 2 hamburgers. And homographs are words with the same spelling but have more than one meaning. Homographs may be pronounced the same, like homonyms, and they may be pronounced differently. Heteronyms, also known as heterophones. Example, she wore a bow when she did not bow to the queen. So they're spelled the same, but they're pronounced differently. Right, okay. Rule number 64. Exact word or word choice. I love how it says ew. Anyway, be certain to select the exact word for the intended meaning. 64A. Frequently confused words. Some words can be confusing and should be considered carefully. Travis, do you want to read? Or did you have a question? Sorry.
No, I was gonna read. Thank you. Affect is a verb which means to influence, while effect is most often used as a noun, meaning the result of a process. Rama hoped to affect the outcome of this decision. She did not know what the effect of the decision would be.
Right. So affect and effect are two very commonly confused words, right? Effect means to influence something, and then effect is the outcome, the one with E. So if you're trying to say something like you want to affect something, right? Or something is affecting something, you would use a FFECT. But if you're talking about something that has already happened, the effects of something, the effect of something that you did, the effect of something someone else did, then you use EFFECT. There are other words like that, like accept and accept, things like that. So be mindful of which word you're using to make sure you know the meaning. If you're confused, see, best thing is if you're confused in, when you're writing the essay, you obviously don't have the resources to go check what, if you're wrong or not, right? You don't have a dictionary, you don't have Google, you don't have anything really. And so if you're confused, it's better to avoid it completely. Use something that you are comfortable with and that you know is correct. Don't want to take risks here, okay? 64B, misunderstood or misused words. Some error words, errors are marked when you have misunderstood or misused a word. Cameron, do you have a question or do you want to read?
I want to read.
Okay. Great. Okay, why don't you read this one right here?
She was impressed with Gatsby's lucrative appearance.
Right. Okay. The word lucrative means producing money, profitable. The writer probably chose the word lucrative to say that the Gatsby appeared rich, but the word doesn't really fit because Gatsby's appearance indicates wealth, but does not produce it. Right. Cool. 64C. Confusing verb rules. Transitive versus intransitive verbs. Use the intransitive verb when there isn't an object. Use the transitive verb when there is an object. Okay, so transitive verbs, no object, right? To lie, to sit, to rise, or, you know, all of those as like, so lie, so in the present tense, lie, past, lay, past particle lane, you know, ing is lying. Whereas transitive, right, it takes the object. And so same things, right? Whereas similar things, but now to lay, right? Present tense is lay, laid, lain, laying. Or sorry, I should have just said, okay. And then to set is set, set, set. Setting. To raise is raise, raised, raised, raising. And so rise and raise, they're similar, but they depend on what sort of transition. Oh, yeah, it is 8. Sorry. I lost track of time. Yeah, okay. You know what? Since it's 8, I'm gonna end this here, and you are free to go. Yeah, if you have any questions, just stay back, and I'll answer them for everyone. Bye, bye, bye. Okay. Yep, bye-bye. So now you had a question about math. Yeah, okay. Give me one sec. Let me pull it up. Okay, so the question about the Scantron, the 3 hours is all the time you will get to answer the questions and fill out the Scantron. So you will not have time afterward. So I suggest as you answer the questions, just bubble in the Scantron as you go, because you will not get extra time, and you don't want to have the reason that you weren't able to answer or missed a question be that you couldn't bubble it in on time. Yeah. Okay. Sinai, can you tell me the page number of the question? I don't think they will give you scrap paper. The paper that you have with the questions, you'll likely have to work out in that. You probably can bring your own. I don't know if they'll let you use it, but I'm pretty sure they may have like scrap paper like with them, and you can ask them to give it to you, or you can bring your own and tell them that like this is to like you may need it, and so that's why you have it. You can give it to them and be like, can you just give it to me when I need it, so that they don't doubt you that you know you have like sort of like things written down or anything, stuff like that. Page one, page 1. Okay. I'm gonna stop recording.